everybody. Big welcome. Thank you very much for coming to Tooting on what looks like quite a nice autumnal day. I'm Judith Ibison. I'm Deputy Course Director for Medicine, and I work with my colleague Hannah, who's on very well-deserved holiday at the moment, who's the Course Director, so apologies from her that she's not here today. However, I am joined by two very important colleagues. So first of all, Laura Byrne, who is consultant in HIV medicine and our admissions tutor, and also Fiorella, who is the head of the MBBS administration programme and really crucial to delivering a great experience for our students because it's quite a complicated programme over 4 or 5 years, as you know. So we'll be able to take some questions on all of those aspects at the end. Welcome. So I don't know if you know the history of St George's, but if you have been around Hyde Park Corner, there's a very nice hotel there that I don't think I've been in yet, called the Lanesborough Hotel, and that's the original site of St George's. So it was a university, or it was a hospital that took in students to train as apothecaries and surgeons back in 1733. I think only men at that point, and I think they only had about 30 students, but they stayed at that site over the next couple of hundred years until the 70s, 1970s, when the hospital and the university decided to relocate out to Tooting and southwest London. And a picture here in the middle of what the old labs were like, and in fact one of my lovely public health colleagues, who is a WHO public health specialist, goes travelling around the world, actually trained at St George's back in Hyde Park Corner, so has got lots of stories of what it was like then. So as you can see, things have changed a bit. We're now at this co-located site with the hospital, which is one of the really nice things about St George's. We get our consultants like Laura walking over from the hospital site into the lecture theatres to give you a lecture on, you know, HIV or whatever it happens to be. So very close collaboration between the university and the hospital. And in fact, it's so close that often patient and the public don't really realise which is which, really, or don't really see them as separate things, because we do work closely together. But if you do live locally, you'll know that St George's, the hospital, is a tertiary centre for many specialties, takes patients from the southwest all the way up to southwest London, but also acts as a district general hospital as well for the local population. So it's where I pitch up if, unfortunately, me or one of my members of the family needs some treatment. Now, just as you all know from walking around Tooting, we're very happily and delighted to be a very diverse community around there. As I say, things weren't always so quite diverse at St George's Medical School. They took their first women in 1915, but only 2 of them, as you can see. But numbers of women have really increased, and we've become more diverse in lots of ways. So we've got the first female Vice-Chancellor, Jenny, who's our current Vice-Chancellor at the university. And you'll know if you've talked to the Students' Union, do come in and sit down. Yeah, please, just don't worry, there's lots of seats. You know, if you've talked to the Students' Union, we've got societies of all kinds, all professions relating to medicine and other healthcare specialties as well within the university. So I'm quite passionate about St George's, and I'm quite passionate about medical education as well. And I'm going to tell you what you get on the tin with St George's. Clearly, we're not the same as Nottingham, you know, with a huge campus, or Leeds, which has got a sort of huge central campus where you go and live with on the university with people doing engineering, science, maths, languages, etc. We are a small, niche, specialist healthcare institution, and we don't have a huge campus. We obviously have halls of residence for undergraduates, but we're not a big campus. But what we are very focused on is creating confident practitioners at the end of your 4 or 5 years. I trained in a pretty awful time with a pretty awful curriculum, and we had a pretty traumatic time becoming house officers, you know, back in the early 80s. That is absolutely not what I want to create in the graduates that we are training to do medicine. So we want people to be competent, confident, to be really good colleagues for their NHS colleagues that they're working with, and above all to be safe and excellent carers for the patients they're looking after. And I do think that we achieved that. And I'm not just saying that, I can give you anecdotal evidence. I was teaching a great session with our final years on Thursday, and a clinical teaching fellow colleague from one of our local hospitals came to help me with teaching, and he was one of our alumni, and he said, really nice, I just want to say thank you, because at the time I didn't realise it, but since I've left St George's I realised what a fantastic programme it was and how well prepared I went to do medicine. And we get that kind of comment a lot. But also, more objectively, there is a preparation for foundation practice survey that's done for people who move into foundation practice each year, and we do really well in terms of graduates being prepared for foundation practice. So we've got a bit of objective evidence about that as well. And just to tell you what else we're like, in that survey of those doctors going into foundation practice, there was one thing last year that they didn't feel so confident about, and that was learning how to hand over a group of patients to a group of colleagues who are coming in onto an evening shift. And so we've now got a student staff partnership group with paid student work looking at how we can improve the teaching of handover for students so we can improve that confidence as they go in. So we're very reactive, we're very focused on what the needs of graduates are, and we aim to be very reactive if we do think there are any areas that can be improved. So you can see our goals here. We want, as I said, our education to transform you, for you to become the person you want to be professionally as you go through our course. We want you to be confident and not scared on the 3rd of August, whatever year it is you'll graduate, different for undergraduates and graduates. We want the care you provide to be excellent, and we want you to be equipped to do whatever career you want to be. So if you want to be a professor of neurosurgery, professor of psychiatry, professor of general practice, HIV, we want to give you the building blocks to do that. But if you don't want an academic career and you want to be a clinician or a manager or a leader in some other sphere, we also want you to prepare to do that as well. So you will have the building blocks to go for whatever kind of medical career you're thinking of. And we've got, do come and sit down? So we've got, you know, quite a lot of older and more recent alumni who you may have or may not have heard. A colleague of mine that I work with is Helen Stokes-Lampard, who was both, she was president of the Students' Union actually. She took a year out of her course and led the Students' Union for a year, but she's now president of the Academy of Royal Colleges, and she's also been president of the Royal College of General Practitioners, so obviously that's somebody I'm involved with. But we have more recent colleagues. Timothy Ho was the clinical leader at Brimley Park Hospital, which is near Aldershot, and they did a really amazing job during the pandemic, transforming their care, and he was recently recognised for his work doing an OBE. Our students go to Frimley happily. And Mohammed is a graduate of St George's, who's a GP now, but he set up our very famous Charities Week, which has raised millions of pounds. It's run every year at St George's over the years since he was here. So some famous older faces, but some famous younger faces as well. And it's hard not to talk about tutoring when you talk about St George's. I'm rather a passionate local resident of Tooting, so I can give you some personal experiences living here. I'm a member of the Lido, which you can see at the top middle. If you've brought your costumes, you can nip down there for a swim before 5 o'clock if you fancy it. But it's also got a lovely common, you know, in southwest London there are other lovely green spaces as well as the river as well. So it's a nice part of London to be in, but also you've got access to central London very easily as well if you're interested in more city life type stuff as well. So have a look around if you've got some time, go to the market, etc. before you go home this evening. So what do we think the highlights of our course are? I mean, probably you're looking at lots of places, and you'll notice that, you know, the courses probably all have some similarities, and that's because we all teach to what we're required to teach for the General Medical Council. But what we are a bit different about at George's is that we have 2 admission streams. We've got the school leaver 5-year stream, which is a 5-year undergraduate course with an optional intercalation year. We don't make you intercalate, but it's there as an option if you'd like to do it. And we've got the graduate entry course as well for people with any kind of degree before they come in. So we've had ballet dancers, journalists, financial science, financial analysts, as well as people who've done human sciences or biomedical sciences coming into medicine as well. So those courses start separately, as you can see, and then they meet and merge in what we call the transitional year. And it's transitional because you do half problem-based learning in small groups and lectures, but half clinical placements. So we do a medicine placement, a surgery placement, and a general practice placement in that year. I should say that you'll also do general practice placements in both streams in the early years. So our graduates who've just arrived are just about to go into their general practice placement, which runs throughout the year in the first year. And for those doing the school leaver course, they have general practice before Christmas, and then 3 2-week early years clinical experience blocks through the rest of the 2 years, and another general practice one. So early clinical exposure in both streams. But transitional year is where it really kicks off and we start having more clinical placements, and that intensifies in the penultimate year and the final year. And of course, I mentioned the optional intercalation. You can do that traditionally after the first 2 years, or you can decide to do it after that transitional year, or you can decide to do it after the penultimate year. And after the penultimate year, you'll have the equivalent of a BSc, so you can think about doing a master's at that point as well, as long as it fits well together with our final year curriculum, which you need to come back into. So I mentioned the kind of curriculum that you need for medicine. You won't be surprised what's in it. There's a lot of knowledge. It's very broad and deep, the knowledge you need for medicine. So we teach that knowledge through 2 themes, basic and clinical sciences, which is all the ologies around medicine that you need to know. But we also teach you about the context of medicine for patients, populations and society. And we teach you about the sociology of medicine. We teach you some epidemiology. We teach you about medicine law and ethics as well. So the kind of broader context of medicine that you need to know as you're practicing. Of course, we teach you professional skills, so you need to know how to take a history, how to examine patients, how to do procedures, and we've got a spiral curriculum around that where you watch things, do things in simulation until you feel confident, and then start to do those on patients in the transitional year. And then we have another domain called Becoming a Doctor, which is again a vertical domain where you get opportunities to practice those skills throughout the course. So 3 kind of key aspects of being a doctor. In terms of the science context, and in the early years, we split the content up between different systems or modules. So, for example, life control would be all about neurology, would be all about the brain, how the body controls itself. Life maintenance would be endocrinology, renal function, those essential bodily systems that keep our metabolism going. So we chunked up the content in that way, but in each of those modules, you'd be having relevant cases, relevant lectures on the basic science, and also patients, population and society, and you'd be doing relevant clinical skills. So it's an integrated learning week and learning system for that content. So you can just read through these science. I mean, what we teach won't be a surprise to you if you've done any kind of science background. Obviously, you know, anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, pathology. There's the factual knowledge you need, but you also need to know how it interplays and interrelates to each other as well. So we're talking always about the interplay of those sciences, those bodily systems, 4 different bodily systems. We talk about pathophysiology. That becomes increasingly important in TEA as you start to see patients who are ill. So, for example, you can see a patient with sepsis who's shocked, hypovolemic, and you can go and talk to your scientist colleagues in your PBL about what's going on at a physiological basis as well. And then factors that affect the outcome of illnesses and their treatment. And of course, that can be patient factors, doctor factors, but might also be societal factors, economic factors, etc. as well. Patients, population and society. I think I've covered probably most of this. I had a great session with some final years on Thursday where my clinical teaching fellow was helping me, and we were doing some service improvement work. So they were working through a scenario where they had to institute or improve clinical services. So that was very much about leadership and management. But you can see that there's all sorts of other skills that you will learn as you go through the curriculum at different stages. And we teach that in a variety of different ways. The professional skills, obviously, as I've mentioned, procedures, clinical skills and communication skills, and becoming a doctor are very much the kind of softer, non-factual side of medicine, but actually the most important part of medicine, because, you know, even though we have numerous scans and diagnostic tests, actually it's basic things like taking a history that's a really crucial tool in your diagnostic armament. And in terms of becoming a doctor, if you're thinking about applying for medicine, some really lovely resources on the GMC for interested students there about the professionalism needed to be a doctor, but also the handbooks and guidance that we're expected to work and live by and demonstrate in our professional lives. So lots of issues such as confidentiality, testing capacity that we would teach you as part of the course, but supported by work on the GMC website as well. So again, I don't think we could probably differentiate ourselves from other places in terms of how people learn, except to say on the graduate course, we were one of the first graduate courses, and we're only a graduate course that takes art students, and that's always been taught in the first year by PBL, problem-based learning. So quite a lot of learning which is self-directed with fewer lectures, contrasting with the 5-year school leaver stream, where there are a lot more lectures and face-to-face learning or online learning within the learning week. And that reflects the different stages of learning the two streams have. So the graduates have been through a degree, know how they learn, confident that they can go off and find information out, whereas people on the undergraduate stream are still learning that. We have expert forums when we get Laura to hoof over from the trust to come and, you know, perhaps talk about an area she's expert in. We teach with other professions. You'll have seen the lovely paramedic site and healthcare professions upstairs if you've been to the hub. We have visits. General practice is really a clinical attachment, but we have, you know, visits to nurseries, visits to neuro rehab places, visits to people with sickle cell disease. So you can talk to patients with different sorts of conditions and learn about the community aspects of that as well. And then, like all medical schools, we have about 15 weeks through the course that you will be able to select yourself in terms of what kind of learning you want to have. And that can start very generic in the early years, but as people get into the final year, they're starting to think, oh, maybe pediatrics, or hopefully they're thinking maybe general practice is a good thing to learn about, and they might go off and spend a student-selected component in a clinical placement related to something they're thinking of doing at a later stage. Obviously, you know, before the pandemic, but the pandemic has intensified our use of technology for learning. We've got a very nice virtual learning environment called Canvas. So if you do a module, you know, you'd have a module on Canvas for that particular learning. You'd have a page for every lecture. There'd be clear resources, quizzes, that kind of thing on the Canvas page, as well as having the lectures delivered live or remotely. We do both. Students are split. They're a bit Marmite about lectures. Some of them like to come, some of them like to do it at home. We record all our lectures using some software called Panopto. You can have a look at our teaching by looking at our MOOCs on the website. So MOOCs are massive open something resources, can't remember what the O and C are, but they're essentially free online courses, and we've got some that we've embedded within the MBBS course. So clinical empathy, preparing for your elective, organ donation, for example, you might want to have a look at, or have a look at the genomics ones. We've got others on there as well. We have an electronic portfolio that you would record your competencies as you go through placements. And obviously, you know, students love using Kahoot for learning. We use Mentimeter in lectures as well. And we've got a fabulous library up there that you can go and sit in and work in, 24-hour access, or you can just use it remotely. Most of the books and journals are online now as well. I don't think, again, this will be a surprise to you. So I think thing to remember, and, you know, we're very, very conscious of the cost pressures for students, both graduates and undergraduates. It is a full-time course. So it is very hard to work financially any significant hours as well as achieve successfully at the course. You know, perhaps students do 12 hours a week or something like that in a paid job, but they do need to be available 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, to attend, you know, lectures or learning. Generally, Wednesday afternoons are off, as at most universities, for other activities and things like that. How much contact time you have varies according to where you are in the course. In the early years, 20 to 60% will be, you know, delivered teaching or small group tutorials or clinical skills sessions or, you know, communication skills sessions. We aim for you to be on site 3 to 4 days a week. Again, we're readjusting post-pandemic, and we find our student cohorts are more like about that as well. Some like to work remotely, some like to be face-to-face, so we've got a kind of compromise. But when you hit those clinical practice years, you are going to be on placement, and that could be any time between 8 and 6 in the evening. And we also timetable out of hours experience as well, because unfortunately not all heart attacks or strokes come in between 9 and 5. And if you want to get key clinical learning outcomes, you've got to be around sometimes at nights or sometimes late into the evening. So we sort of rota that in the later clinical placements. And then finally, assessments. You know, it's a regulated course. We have to check that your learning and your level of achievement's appropriate for each year. So each year you'll have a written assessment done either on a computer or on a piece of paper, usually a single best answer. You'll also have a clinical assessment where you demonstrate your clinical skills, procedural skills, and history taking skills. And you'll also have that workplace portfolio where you're demonstrating what you've been doing during the course as well. And you can, I think I have mentioned intercalation, so you can intercalate. Traditionally, it was always done at the end of year 2 if you're an undergraduate, but I think actually students really enjoy intercalating a bit later when they're a bit clear about what career pathways they might be thinking of. So you can intercalate after the transitional year or after the penultimate year as well. And if you do it a bit later, you'll have the equivalent of a degree, and so you can think about doing an MSc at a later stage if that's what you'd like to do. So we've got the George's intercalation options here, and you can see that they're very diverse. I mean, they range from medical humanities, medical ethics, global health, down to wet lab type subjects that you can do if you're, intending to really specialise in a particular area of the science. And similarly, really nice MSCs that you can do as well. I mean, I shouldn't be biased, but people really enjoy global health a lot and really get a lot out of that. But also sports cardiology. Professor Shah is in charge of the London Marathon, and he's got an amazing sports exercise program, teaching program here, undergraduate and postgraduate level as well. And we also have, I'm part of something called the Institute of Medical and Biomedical Education, but we've also got our colleagues in 3 research institutes at George's as well, who do an amazing job. Very focused. We're not huge. We're not like Imperial. We're not like Cambridge. We don't have the same degree of funding. But what they do is really focused and really excellent. And that was recognised in our recent ref when we had very, very good high level of world leading outputs, and we were very highly ranked in terms of impact on populations. I think the other thing, I mean, you'll probably all be aware that there's a new assessment coming into medicine. So the GMC has sort of taken over the final year assessment, and something called the medical licensing assessment will be coming in for you and your cohort. And we're already 2 years down the road in preparing for that. So every year of the course, you'll be given some clinical practice outcomes that are right for you at your level in the attachment that you're doing. So if you're doing a general practice attachment, we'll tell you what skills you should be developing during that attachment, what knowledge you should be gaining during that attachment as well. Those are your clinical practice outcomes, and those are mapped to the medical licensing assessment that you will be doing at the end of the course. To help you in addition, we also tell you which conditions you should be aiming to become familiar with in each attachment in each year. So, for example, PEDS, you do in, the penultimate year. We'll tell you not every paediatric condition, because we know you're not going to see everyone, but the important common ones that you will see, we expect you to learn about, and that you could potentially be examined on in our exams, but also the medical licensing assessment at the end of the final year as well. And then the other learning tool that we have to support you is a structured program of immersive sort of experiential learning, so encouraging you to practice those crucial professionalism, clinical communication, procedural skills with real patients in a safe way on the wards as well, and other aspects of your personal development that you would need to become an efficient and excellent doctor. So just to go through the years, I think I've probably covered this. So transitional year, remember, half clinical, half PBL, all sorts of different teaching methods. And at the end of it, when you've passed your exam, you have your second student selected component. The penultimate year is your specialties year, and what we really notice is that students will come out of T year feeling okay and confident. I'm, know about common conditions, I can do a history, can do an examination. They then go into P year, and it's very immersive, quite intense, and they come out really just requiring a bit of a polish in the final year before becoming doctors. It's a really transformative year, and people become very confident and really take on the identity, I think, of being a doctor during the experience of that year. And then final year is about preparing you to pass these national exams and pass them well, so that you go where you want to go in terms of your career. And in order to help you do that, we give you 3 placements where you'll be on a one-to-one placement. So you'll be supervised by one doctor working with that doctor. So for example, in medicine and surgery, you'll be working with the foundation doctor, doing their job with them and for them, supervised by them so that you're safe, but practicing what you will be doing the following August when you're actually qualified and earning money. And we also have one of those in general practice as well, where you'll be seeing your own patients in your own surgery, supervised by the GP at that practice. You also do emergency medicine. You can probably see why that's in the final year. It requires a wide range of experience and skills to do emergency medicine, critical care and anaesthetics, public health, and some advanced simulation as well. And you get about 10 weeks of chosen clinical exposure in the final year as well, which happily can now be abroad. Actually, we did have a couple of years of students not going abroad, but if people wish to, they can. And don't forget, you can intercalate at those later stages of the course, so you can choose to do that at a later stage. So I think I've given you a personal flavour of why St George's, really. You'll get a particular type of experience here. We are not a huge university, but we are very committed to healthcare. We've got lovely colleagues doing other healthcare professional training courses as well, and we really enjoy our immersion with the trust, but also with the local community as well. We think we're a really good course, and that's the feedback we get from people who've left us in terms of having, you know, all the same kind of teaching methodologies and contents that you would probably get at most medical schools. I envisage it's probably not that different elsewhere. I've got great colleagues. That's why I've never left St George's, really. So the medical education fraternity, but also our clinical colleagues and the GP community are fabulous. Our professional administration colleagues are really committed to the students having a fantastic time. So hopefully you'll pick that up. And Tooting is a great place. It's very close to the centre of London, but also, you know, you're an hour and a half from the south coast as well. So all in all, you know, I think you should go and have a think about yourself, think about what kind of course, what kind of student experience you want when you're doing medicine. Have a look around, you know, have a look around the country and have a look at all of the other courses. But I think you would have a very happy, productive time training to be an excellent doctor if you came here. I'm very confident you'd have the opportunity to do that. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Laura, who's going to talk about probably what you really want to hear about, which is admissions, and we'll take some questions at the end.
Hi, everyone. So I'll talk a little bit about admissions into the 5-year course and also the graduate entry 4-year course as well. Just to say, obviously, first of all, I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all the different qualifications that we accept, but there's loads of really good information on the website if you go to entry criteria for each of the courses. And if you can't find, if you've got a qualification that you can't find on the website, you're not sure if we accept, then please email the admissions team and they will search it out for you. So this is just a slide showing our entry requirements for the 5-year course for school leavers. So we require 5 GCSEs at grade 6 or above, and it has to include English language, maths, and either double or triple science. Obviously, we're mindful of the fact that not all schools offer triple science, so you can definitely apply here with double science. And our minimum A-level offer is 3 A's, but it may be A star AA. That just depends on the situation. And this needs to be at the first attempt and done over 2 years. Then we also require for the 5-year course the UCAT exam, which we have a minimum requirement of 500 and above in each section. We've actually, sorry, I haven't updated this slide, but for the for entry into 2023 and later, we actually will be using the SJT section of the UCAT. So that is the situational judgment test. And we haven't previously included that in our admissions process, but we will be doing that. The exact way that we'll be using it is not yet finalised. And if you had a look on the admission statistics part of the website, it will show you the UCAT cutoff scores for interviews for the past few years. It has changed quite a lot. And so the way that we use the UCAT is once you've passed the entry criteria, we use the UCAT to rank candidates to decide who we invite for an interview. And so the UCAT score does change every year. So we can't tell you in advance what the cutoff is going to be for interview. It all depends on the number of applications we get and the spread of scores that those applicants have. But you can look on the website and look at the previous years as a guide. So obviously we accept a lot of alternative qualifications. You don't need to have done A-levels. So we accept the International Baccalaureate, the Access to Medicine diplomas, and you can also apply to the 5-year course with an undergraduate or a postgraduate degree. For an undergraduate degree, we require a 2-1 or above, and you just need to pass a postgraduate degree. We also have a new and quite broad contextual admissions process now. So I've laid it out on the slide. I won't go through everything, but we split people up into 3 different groups. And those, if you fall in group 1 or group 2, you're eligible for some pre-application support, some post-application kind of support around the time of the interview, but also you might be eligible for a contextual offer. And a contextual offer is a lower offer to our minimum requirement of 3 A's. So if you're to be in group 2, you need to have 2 out of the 5 specified criteria. This is all laid out on the website. So if you think you might be eligible, to fall into one of these 3 groups, then please have a look at the website and you can contact the widening participation team at St George's. So the pre-application support, which some of you might already have experienced, is things like bursaries to come to open days like today, but also there are some virtual pre-application events with advice and guidance, and you may also enrol in some other widening participation activities. Post-application support includes things like a travel bursary to attend your interview, a webinar on how to prepare for your interview, travel bursaries for offer holder days, which are like open days we have for people who are holding an offer for us. And when it comes to doing the fitness to practice things, which are things like occupational health and DBS checks, once you are an offer holder, there's also some support, some financial support for that. And if you are eligible for a contextual offer from us, that can be up to 2 grades lower than our minimum published requirement. So then the 4-year course, this is open to graduates with either an undergraduate degree or a postgraduate degree. So again, you need to attain a 2-1 or above in an undergraduate degree. And then for the 4-year course, the graduate entry course, we need you to do the GAMSAT exam, which is a science-based kind of knowledge-based test. As Judith said earlier, we don't limit the 4-year course to science graduates, which many universities do. So you can hold an undergraduate or postgraduate degree in any subject to apply, as long as you've sat the GAMSAT exam. And again, we'll use the GAMSAT to rank applicants to decide who to invite for an interview. And work experience has been a hot topic for the last couple of years, because obviously it's been much more difficult to get in-person healthcare related work experience, and all medical schools across the country have recognised this, and everyone has relaxed their work experience requirements. So really, the purpose of work experience is to give you an understanding of what life might be like as a doctor, what it's like working in a healthcare team within the NHS. But you can get that level of understanding from lots of different sources. It doesn't have to be face-to-face healthcare-based work experience. So you can use any experience in which demonstrates your values, attitudes and behaviours, the things that we're looking for to select people who we think are going to be good, effective doctors. You can use any experience, so it might be that you've done some volunteer work or community work. You can read books about life in medicine, you can listen to podcasts, watch TV programmes, and there have been quite a few different documentaries filmed here at St George's, which are great to watch. And there's also some really good information on the Medical Schools Council website, the GMC website, and the NHS Employers website. And what we're really looking for in the interview, which is where you use your work experience, is we're looking for your personal experience and how that relates to the values and attitudes and behaviours that we're looking for when we're selecting you. So we want you to use any of these experiences, whether it's caring for a family member or doing some volunteer work, or doing some paid work. You know, this gives you skills like team working, dealing with members of the public, communication skills. All of those things are things which we're interested in talking to you about at the interview. So these are just some resources for kind of online work experience or virtual working experiences. Some institutions have developed really nice online programs that you can enrol in. As Judith mentioned, we've got the MOOCs on FutureLearn, which you can do, the St George's courses. So yeah, and then the Medical Schools Council have actually produced a PDF guide on kind of alternative forms of work experience. But also, very happily, the in-person work experience is back at St George's Hospital. So you can email this email address, which is work.experience@stgeorges.nhs.uk. So we had developed a virtual work experience programme for the last 2 years, but we are back to providing in-person work experience, which is great. So just a little bit about the MMI. So an MMI is very similar to a clinical exam that you might do when you're studying medicine. So they are used not just for healthcare courses, but for many different kinds of courses across the world now. And St George's was an early adopter of MMIs. And the reason to use an MMI instead of a traditional panel interview is that it reduces bias in an interview. So the assessors don't talk to each other. So you go into a room if it's face-to-face, and there are a number of stations, and you do one question at each station, and there's an assessor at each station. And so, for example, in question 1, the assessor will stay and assess all the students doing question 1, and they won't talk to the assessor in question 2 about what they thought about the candidate. They'll just mark it independently, and then all the scores get put together. You get a total overall score. So the great thing about that is if you fluff up question 1, you're nervous, it's your first question, you don't quite get the words out right, you go into question 2, it's a new person, they didn't hear your answer for question 1, you can start afresh, take a deep breath, start again, and their assessment of you won't be affected by the previous question. So that's really good. It also has been proven to reduce the bias that can sometimes come with assessors. You know, assessors don't come together and have a discussion about whether they think you're going to fit in or whatever. It's kind of much more structured than that. So that's why we run them. We had to pivot to doing online MMIs, which was quite a challenge in the pandemic, but we're now definitely aiming to be back in person for 2023 entry, unless something terrible happens. So we're currently planning for the in-person MMIs. We haven't finalised the number of stations yet, but it will be, you know, you can find lots of online information about MMIs and practice questions. The questions are based on NHS values, so make sure you know them. And as I said, each question is marked by a different assessor for fairness. At St George's, we also think it's really important that you're not just assessed by doctors. So we have a wide range of assessors. So it might be other academic staff in the university, it might be allied health professionals and other professional staff, so that we get a wide range of perspectives within your interview. So I'm just going to finish with my top tips for the MMI. So obviously everyone gets nervous in an interview. I do too. And sometimes the biggest pitfall can be not to read the question properly or not to listen to the question properly. So just take your time and try and think about why we've asked you the question, like what you think we're trying to get at. What we really want is a personal view, an authentic view of who you are and why you think you would make a good doctor and what skills and values and attributes you have, and your job is to try and get that across. So we don't want you to be super over rehearsed. We don't want you to have rote answers that you've learned off by heart. We really want to get you to be able to get your enthusiasm across. And we want you to use personal examples from your life and your work to illustrate the values, attitudes and behaviours we're trying to elicit from you. So do prepare. And the best way of preparing, because it can be quite a nerve-wracking experience, is to practice answering questions with your friends, your family, or even just in front of a mirror to get you used to formulating an answer on the spot, out loud, look at your body language, smile and try and get your enthusiasm across, try and get over those nerves. So you should practice, but we definitely don't want you to come to the interview with rote answers. So try to be spontaneous. And, you know, we want you to know about how the NHS works. So have done some reading, have listened to some things, have watched some TV programmes, so that you can talk a little bit about what you think it's like to work in the NHS and as a doctor. Be honest. You know, honesty and probity is a big thing in medicine. We are trying to measure that in our interview process and our selection process. We need people who are going to adhere to professional standards. So try and be authentic and honest and try and be yourself. Medicine, there is space in medicine for lots of different people from lots of different walks of life. There's space for introverts, there's space for extroverts. You know, you don't have to have one fixed personality type. So just be yourself. That's what we want to see. And that's it. Just good luck with your applications. But I think there's some time for questions now. Anyone got a burning question?
Yeah, do you want to?
So we don't. So obviously you need to write them, and other universities do take them into account in the selection process, but we don't take them into account in the selection process for medicine. Yeah.
When will the interviews be held?
So we don't have any fixed dates yet. They're normally held in the autumn, sort of November, December for the 5-year course, and a bit later for the 4-year course.
Somebody behind have another question?
Just about electives, do you have that option?
Did you say electives? Yeah, so the first kind of option, real option, comes in the transitional year. So we have a 3-year student selected component. We've got a broad range of options that people can do, but sometimes our international students, for example, might travel back home and do an audit or quality improvement project there. But we have got talk projects that people can choose to do here. We have students going off to the apothecaries. But then the main elective period is in the final year, where there are 2 electives. There's one before finals, which is a 5-week clinical block. So students go off and find a clinical attachment that they're particularly interested in. That's what most students do. There are other options like leadership and management or medical education that people can do that are a bit different. But most people go in and find a clinical placement they're interested in. And then there's the finals is over elective, which people do in May and June of the final year. And, you know, again, that can be anywhere in the UK, or people can choose to go abroad happily now that the pandemic has receded a bit and the vaccines are working. So, yeah, so probably, you know, that tier one is not so many people tend to travel away to do that. They tend to do it locally and choose local options. But certainly the final year ones are the main ones. And they're a transformative experience. They're really great. And I'm very happy people can go